Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? My name is Evan. Let's stand together. We're going to sing today of the deepness of God. Deeper than religion. Deeper than a creed, deeper than tradition, deeper than my need, deeper than conviction, deeper than all I can see, deeper than restriction, deeper than this heart in me. You are deeper, you are. Efforts, all the deeds that I could do, deeper than what's written, all the facts that I can find, deeper than all knowledge, deeper than my mind. You are deeper. You're the peace, you're the God of mystery, deeper than I understand. Your love and your love, you'll always find me out. You can hold me in your hand, yeah, deeper than I make with you, deeper than my efforts, all the deeds that I can do, deeper than what's written, all the facts that I can find, deeper than all knowledge, deeper than my mind. You are deeper. You are. You're the love and you're the peace, you're the God of righteousness, the great unchangeable I am, the King of glory and of grace. One with himself I cannot die. I'm purchased by his blood. I've been king with Christ on high, with Christ my Savior and my God. Because the sinless Savior died, my sinful soul is counted free. God is just and satisfied to look on him and pardon me. In the him and pardon me. Amen. You hold the reins on the sun and the moon, like horses driven by kings. You cover the mountains, the valleys below, the breath of your mighty wings. All treasures of wisdom and things to be known are hidden inside your hand. In this fortunate turn of events, you ask me to be your friend. You ask me to be your friend. And you are my first, you are my last, you are my constellations are swimming in the south, the breath of your desire. Where could I run? Where could I hide from your heart's jealous fire? All treasures of wisdom and things to be known are hidden inside your hands. In this fortunate turn of events, you ask me to be your friend. You ask me to be your friend. You are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. And you for you now. The greatness of your renown. I have heard the majesty and wonder of you, King of heaven, humility I bow as your love, wave after wave, crashes over me, crashes over me. You are for us, you are not against us, champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in. You call us whenever you call my name. I've heard the song of love that you sing. Whoa, so I will let you draw me out beyond the shore into your grace, into your grace, and it's your love, wave after wave, crashes over me, crashes over me. You are for us, you are not against us, champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in. You make me brave, you make me brave. You call me out beyond the shore into the waves. You make me brave, you make me brave. No fear can hinder now the promises you made. Sing that. You make me brave, you make me brave. You call me out beyond the shore into the waves. Yeah, you make me brave, you make me brave. No fear can hinder now the promises you made. And as your love, wave after wave, crashes over me, crashes over me. And you are for us, you are not against us, champion of heaven, you made a way for all, champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in. Thank you, God. Thank you for making us brave. Thank you for being strong and mightier than we are, God. Thank you that we can't do this thing on our own. It has to come from you, Lord. Thank you, God, for your presence this morning as we lift our voices and respond to you, God. I pray and ask that you stay with us now. Continue to teach us and speak to us, God. I pray that we have ears to hear you and eyes to see you, Lord. We love you and pray all this in your name. Amen. Oh, a little sweaty up here. Good morning. So glad that you guys are here. Before you sit, turn to somebody and say, what is your favorite movie? Mine is Rocky, because Rocky Balboa is just, I don't know, he's a hero. He's awesome. And after that, you can have a seat.
morning, Crossroads. How are we doing? 11:45? Awesome. My name is Kendra. I'm a volunteer around here. I serve on the Kids Club prep team, and my husband and I help lead a community group called Storyform Life. So, hey, we've been talking about this Crossroads code for the last couple weeks, and it simply just says who we are and why we do the things that we do. And it says that we are inspired workers, we are obsessive includers, we are sacrificial givers, and we do life together. So everything you see us running after here falls underneath that code. And speaking of inspired workers, this morning, 250 people returned from New Orleans on their Go NOLA trip. Loving on that community down there. It's awesome. If that's not cool enough, this morning, 70 men left for the first ever all-man week Go NOLA, which is awesome. They're going to be building homes with their bare hands, doing other manly things like tug-of-war, arm wrestling, gator wrestling. So it should be awesome. Can't wait to hear the stories that come out of that. Guys, if you are interested in doing something like this in the future, we hope to have more trips. So just pray for these guys. If it goes well and they don't ruin it, there'll be more stuff like this. So last summer, we had our first family movie night, and we all came here. We watched Frozen, and it was awesome. We're going to do it again on July 31st from 6:30 to 8:30 here at the Westside. This would be a perfect event for you guys to invite friends that wouldn't normally come to a weekend service, but would be down to watch a movie with your friends and family. Now, the movie is PG, and I can't tell you the name of it for copyright reasons, but it's something about a large hero and a number greater than 6. So hopefully you can figure it out. So we believe, like I said earlier, that when we do life together, the relationships grow deeper and stronger. And so if we get outside of this dark auditorium and get into a more personal connection, we can do that. So we're having Grill and Go, and that's going to be on August 14th. I'm going to be there if you need a reason to go. And so basically what it is we're just going to have 5 or 6 families get into a home in this community, and you're just going to share a meal together, have a beer, compare cornhole sets, that type of thing. You can go to crossroads.net/grillandgo for more information. So go there, go sign up. We still need about 15 hosts, so if you're interested in having people over to your house, it's a great way to get to know some people. So none of this stuff will be possible without the generosity of people from like you and me. And so in a minute, the bags are going to come around, and you can give that way, or you can give like my husband and I do. We just go to crossroads.net/gift or e-gift or give. crossroads.net/give, and it's just an automatic withdrawal from our checking account, and then we don't even have to think about it. If this is your first time here, go ahead and let the bag pass you on by. We're excited about you. We're not excited about your money. So today we have the privilege of hearing from our very own campus pastor, Greg McElfresh, and Greg's going to talk to us about his favorite movie. So before he comes up, let's take a look at the preview.
Come on, do you love it? Do you love it? So who thought that we were actually going to talk 50 Shades of Grey today? You do not know me well. We would never talk that movie. In fact, we're not even going to talk Bruce Almighty today. My name's Greg. I'm the campus pastor, and it's Campus Pastor Teaching Week, which means that all of our sites, campus pastors get to talk, and not because we're better teachers, but because it gives us a chance for you to get to know us a little bit better. And today, you chose the right day to come to Westside because we are talking comedies. We're talking comedies all day, and specifically the genre of why do we like to laugh so much? Why do we pay millions of dollars to the box office to make us laugh? This is just sort of wired into who I am. I love to laugh. I oftentimes, honestly, probably should get my pastor card revoked at the jokes I tell or the things that I laugh at. And man, it's just sort of like, it's even in my movie collection. I went down in the basement and looked at when I used to buy DVDs, and it's like Braveheart, Gladiator, no thank you. Been there, done that. I know how they end. But you show me a great Adam Sandler or Jim Carrey movie, I will buy it every time. No doubt, those men on their way down to NOLA are watching funny old comedies and laughing. That is one bus I would not want to be on. Can you imagine how bad that smells right now on that bus to NOLA? But that's what we're going to be talking about today, comedies. And I get the sense that you love comedies too. I know this because I put up a status update a couple weeks ago on Facebook, and I just said, hey, I need help for a teaching do you have any favorite comedy scenes? And it was like the most responded to post I've ever done. You can see there's people who are writing. And also, I'd say some of you have no idea what's appropriate to show at church. I'm like blushing at your suggestions for what's going on here. But we're going to be looking at different comedies today. And in fact, I don't know if you noticed, there's this little thing on stage here. What in the world is, oh, it's a really sweet lever. Do you want to see what it does? Yeah? All right, here we go. Welcome to Crossroads Westside. Are you offended yet? Are you offended? Oh, man, this is going to be fun today. It is going to be fun. Now, throughout this series, Why Movies Matter, we've had some different folks try to come across as looking a little bit intelligent because they sort of talk about how every one of this particular genre follows something. So Stephen Manuel talked about Star Wars, and he pointed out that every Star Wars actually just falls under the story of an epic. And then Kyle Ransom talked about superhero movies and said, it's the same here. Every superhero movie's got a supervillain, a superhero, and it looks a little bit like this. I'm going to prove the same thing about comedies, and I'm going to take you to a little bit of a dark spot because I want you to go back to your high school English class. It's not going to be much fun. I remember my high school English teacher. She wore the highest heels, the shortest skirts, and she had the longest dark hair. The only problem was she was like 68 years old. And we're going to go back to Mrs. Stewart's English class, and she would have said that every story basically looks the same. Every story basically looks the same. Let's see if I can use this iPad to illustrate what every story looks like. So every story basically looks like this arc. Can you see that? No, you can't see that. Let me do it in white. There we go. Every story basically looks like this arc. And at the beginning of a story, everything is going fine when there's some sort of inciting incident. And this inciting incident basically interrupts the lives of our characters, and our story begins. We see the rising action where tension is building, things don't seem to be going right, we're not sure how this is going to end, and ultimately, there's the climax. The climax happens when there's a shift in momentum. We start to see maybe the good guy might come out on top after all, and then that falling action is all the resolution as we get to the end of our story. That's every basic story falls under that. But we also learned that every story can fit into one of two types. One of two types, either comedy or tragedy. You remembering this? Every story is either a comedy or a tragedy. In a tragedy, the hero loses. But in a comedy, the hero wins. In a tragedy, it's marked because, it seems like fate is going to prevail, and yet in a comedy, humanity triumphs. Humanity comes out on top. Said very simply, in tragedies, they have a sad ending, while comedies have happy endings. Let's look at our chart. If we sort of look here at what that might look like, maybe you have a tragedy where you start with someone on top, and throughout the course of the story, something happens that just takes them down. But a comedy, what do we know about comedies? Well, comedies, through the life of the story, they always have a happy ending, and they come out on top. Now, you don't have to take my word for this. I'll actually prove it to you with some classics, that every comedy that we love actually follows this. So let's first start with a classic. How about Dumb and Dumber? Come on, Harry and Lloyd. Who does not love Dumb and Dumber? All right, so what's happening here? Let's see if it works through our story arc. So Harry and Lloyd, they're minding their own business. Everything's going fine when all of a sudden, Lloyd takes a beautiful woman to the airport named Mary Samsonite, one of the two. She leaves her briefcase at the airport, and he convinces his buddy, we've got to go to Aspen and get this briefcase back to her. And of course, tension rises as they start to spend the money in the briefcase. They fill it with IOUs, and wouldn't you know, it was ransom money. And these two knuckleheads end up in a hotel room held hostage. But of course, it's a comedy, right? So it has to end happily. They get broken free. Neither one of them gets married, but as luck would have it, on their way home, walking back home in the desert, the Hawaiian Tropic swim team is looking for a couple of oil boys for their swimsuit calendar. And what do Harry and Lloyd do? They say, you can find some guys just down the road that way. That's what it followed. Somebody down here, Ruth Pitzer, I love how much you laugh at me already. This is amazing for me. I'm going to do it all service long, I promise. Let's take another one. Let's check out Anchorman. All right, so that's Ron Burgundy. And by the way, the blonde is Veronica Corningstone. And if you know anything about Anchorman, Ron Burgundy is a lead news anchor, and his world is interrupted when he finds out there's going to be a female co-anchor in Veronica Corningstone, and the tension rises when we find out Ron Burgundy will read anything off of a teleprompter, including the F word. His story unravels until the end. The climax happens when guess who's in the bear pit at the zoo? Ron comes to rescue Veronica, and they live happily ever after. Co-anchors on the world news. I'm telling you, every single comedy doesn't just make us laugh, but the reason we love them is because there's always a predictable, somehow this thing is going to end well. There's going to be a happy ending. And that's actually why we're talking about comedies today. We're not talking about comedies because we like to laugh, although we do. We're talking about comedies because they give us joy, and really because our hearts are wired for happy endings. We love comedies because our hearts are wired for happy endings. Most recent time I experienced some joy that was sort of in my mind was we found out we're expecting our third, and man, it was like, this is really cool. What I love specifically was the way I found out. Thank you. The way I found out was Abby had went before I woke up and gotten a pink and a blue balloon, and I'm going to show you probably the most self-deprecating video that you could ever see. This is me finding out we were going to have another baby. Are you pregnant? Ah! Yay! Oh, that was so fast! Now, let me unpack something. I don't know what happened to my voice, but I took on the form of a woman for a minute. And men in the room, you would notice my first comment was, fist bump, that was fast. That was fast. That was my comment to Abby. So that was a recent time where I remember like, man, that was joy. That was joy. I came unglued. What's going to happen is we're going to have another little girl. That adds 3. Heaven help us. We'll have a third little girl. And at some point, she's going to have her first laugh. She's going to have her first laugh. And I'm not talking about a coo or a giggle. I'm saying at some point, she's going to have somewhere well up in her a belly laugh. I remember Emmy, our oldest. Her first laugh, we were in aisle 407 at Lowe's looking for a runner to keep our rug from slipping, and she let out the biggest belly laugh, and we just stopped in our tracks. We got out our smartphones. We're recording her. We're doing stupid stuff in the aisle to make her do it again. It was as a parent, we just remember that. How many parents in here remember your kid's first laugh? Yes, you do. You remember this stuff because it's sort of it's a pause, and you go, man, I had to teach you how to sleep through the night. I had to teach you how to take a bottle, but this laughter thing, it just sort of came out of you. 4th of July, we took the girls to a friend's lake house, and man, when our friend Mikey put on full throttle on that speedboat, our girls came unglued. They could not contain themselves. They were slipping out of the front of the boat because they were laughing so hard. They couldn't breathe. They couldn't speak. All they could do was laugh. What's my point? Whether you're feeling and expressing joy right now, the reality is every single person in this room had a first laugh. And every single person in here knew it was hardwired into you how to express joy. Point number 1, we were created for joy. We were created for joy. There's a group of theologians back in the 1600s, and they got together. They were trying to put down, for really the first time, the Christian faith on paper. They were trying to get this sort of manifesto down. They're actually called catechisms, if you ever heard of this phrase. And in this particular catechism, it was just a bunch of questions and answers that they asked. The number 1 question on that Westminster Catechism was this: what is the chief and highest end of man? That was question number 1. They said, okay, first, let's just start off with a basic question. Why are we here? What's our purpose? And here's the answer they came up with. Man's chief and highest end is to glorify God and fully to enjoy him forever. Forever. They said, okay, we've looked through all of Scripture, we've compared for decades and centuries of Christianity, and what we believe to be the case is that the purpose that man is here for is to glorify God and to have complete joy in him. That's why we're here, to have joy in the Father. Did they get it right? Well, I think it's backed up by the Bible. Check out what Philippians 4:4 says. Rejoice in the Lord always, And again, I'll say, rejoice. Some of us may have even heard this verse before. Go, oh, that sounds familiar. Paul's writing to this church. He says, hey, above all, I want you to be joyful all the time. And if you forget what I just said, I'll remind you, be joyful, rejoice, do it all the time, which for me just raises another question. Because to rejoice always would mean that I have to always be happy. And I don't know about you, but there are times in my life where it's really easy to be joyful, but there are other times where, man, I'm just down in the dumps, and it's like joy is nowhere to be found. So what do we make of this? Well, last year, if you remember, if you were around then, we did this series called The Meaning Of. And in The Meaning Of, we took a look at some words that really have been co-opted by American culture, and we said, what's really at the root of this word? And one of the weeks we spent talking about happiness. Happiness. What's happiness? And we sort of said, well, happiness seems to be this thing that we're always after, but we can never really achieve it. And we talked about the Bible uses a different word called joy. Now, I'll just say when it comes to happiness, I am the king. I'm the king of if I only had X, then I would be happy. I don't know if any of you are like that, but I mean, when we moved to the Westside, one example is we thought, man, if we could build a house when we move over here, this would be awesome. We know Westside's not going to launch for a while. We've got time, and it's in our budget. Let's build a house, and we put in the floor plan that we wanted. We got the kitchen that we wanted. We got a white kitchen. Oh, man, it is awesome. And, like, this is bringing some serious happiness until Google Maps satellite images is updated, and we find out that we have the smallest freaking house on the street. Are you kidding me? Come on. All the happiness was just gone. And it was like, okay, got to watch House Hunters on HGTV because there's going to be another house out there that will make me happy. Some of you, I'll say it nicely, some of you suckers got sucked into Amazon Prime Day this week, and you found a $300 magic bullet on sale for $29.95 with free 2-day shipping, and you said, that has joy written all over it. Sign me up, baby. And you, 2 days later, got that magic bullet, and you realized that is not delivering the joy that you thought it would. There's a scientific term for this. It's called the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill basically says that our current level of happiness is always based off of the next level to be achieved. Only the problem is that once we achieve that next level, there will always be another level that pops up. There's always going to be a brass ring, and as soon as you grasp it, there's going to be a brighter, shinier brass ring that shows up right above it. This whole study is called behavioral economics, and the founder, Daniel Kahneman, says this. People are exposed to many messages that encourage them to believe that a change of weight, scent, hair color, or coverage, in my case, car, clothes, or many other aspects will produce a marked improvement in their happiness. Our research suggests a moral and a warning. Here it is. Nothing that you focus on will make as much difference as you think. This study says nothing that you focus on, the harder body, the bigger house, the faster car, the higher salary, nothing that you focus on will deliver as much joy as you think it will. Now, this is sort of a bummer. This is sort of a bummer because the American culture has gotten really good at every 30 seconds between our favorite shows telling us what will finally make us happy. So what do? Does this just mean that we're never happy and we're always going to be chasing something? Well, luckily, the Bible has a definition of joy that's actually achievable. It's in the book of Psalms, chapter 37, verse 4, where it says this, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. This verse is saying, I know that you're after things like joy and happiness. I know that those things are waxing and waning constantly, but if you would just come to me first, if you would put your hope in me rather than the Amazon Prime Day magic bullet, I will give you hope and joy and happiness that far exceeds those things that seemingly never deliver. You know, said differently, happiness is something that we can pursue that we will never achieve. But joy is just a byproduct of experiencing God. God says, if you experience me, you will have all the joy you ever need because it's a byproduct. It just comes out of me. Let's do another clip. Woo! 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 Talladega Nights. Hey, here's the good news. If you've never seen any of these movies, I'm showing you the best parts. So, just go back, watch the message. You'll have all these movies. So we sort of get this idea that, okay, maybe there's something different between just happiness and joy. But, why? Why were we created to be joyful in the first place? And I think, as I've looked at this, I think the main reason you and I were created to be joyful is because it gives us strength. Number 2 today, joy gives us strength. There's a book in the Old Testament of the Bible called Nehemiah. And in this book of Nehemiah, this guy is talking to the nation of Israel who has basically turned their back on God. God has rescued them over and over. He's proven to be faithful to them. And every time they turn their backs and they go after something else that they think is going to bring them long-term happiness and joy. And Nehemiah gathers them all together and he reads out of the book of the law. And he reads about how God has standards and they've pretty much blown by every single one of them. And it slices their hearts wide open. They're convicted. They feel shame. They feel guilt. And Nehemiah actually thinks that that's a great response. Check out what he says, 8:10. Go your way. Eat the fat and drink sweet wine and send portions to anyone who has nothing ready. For this day is holy to our Lord. And do not be grieved, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. There it is. The joy of the Lord is your strength. He says, hey, this thing in you that's actually feeling a little bit of conviction and that's saying maybe we've turned our backs on God and maybe we need to look at him again for lasting joy. He says, this is perfect and this is a reason to celebrate. I want you to go find the fattiest pork chop you can, get all the sweet wine. You're going to have a party because the joy of the Lord is going to be your strength. This phrase, joy of the Lord, shows up over and over in the Bible. And the really sort of weird thing about this phrase, joy of the Lord, is that it's oftentimes amidst terrible circumstances. Terrible circumstances. Here's 2 versions of it. James 1:2 says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. What? Here's another one, 2 Corinthians. In all our affliction, I'm overflowing with joy. Now, in case you don't realize it, things like affliction and trials, those are usually bad. Those are usually bad, and yet we see here that these people's joy is overflowing, that it's full. So then what is the joy of the Lord? Well, the joy of the Lord has one source, and that's when we wrap our minds and our hearts around what it is that God has done for us. Think about the first time. If you're somebody who follows Jesus, think about the first time you heard the good news, the gospel. Maybe it was at a weighted, maybe it was at an Easter program, maybe it was just a friend talking to you. And you heard that, man, there's been some things that we've done in our lives that have separated us from God because God's holy and he has standards, but he wasn't okay with that. And he sent a rescue plan in motion. He sent his son Jesus to come and live a perfect life and to die for you and for me. And he took the hit for everything bad that we'd ever done and everything bad that we ever will do. And we can actually be back in relationship with God and have hope and joy right in this lifetime. If you remember the first time you heard that and said, that sounds good, I want that, there was something that was produced in you that was called the joy of the Lord. And what Nehemiah says here is when you're experiencing that joy of the Lord, when you remember his promises, it gives you unbelievable strength. Now, some of us may know people who are actually really good at using these muscles. Every now and then you might come across a family or an individual who it just looks as though the deck is stacked against them. And it's like, man, I would not want to be in these people's shoes. I would not want their circumstances. And yet their level of joy that they're operating with is better than ours when our life is going perfectly fine. You go, how in the world can this be? Well, chances are they're tapping into the joy of the Lord. I'll just admit and say this is not a strong suit of mine. This is not a strong suit of mine. We have these things around our house called birthday questions. And on every birthday, whether you're a friend or someone in our family, you get 3 questions. It was, what was the best part of your year last year? What was the worst part of your year last year, and what are you looking forward to the most? And typically, the worst part of your year, people try to go, well, I don't know, it's a really good year, and I'm typically like that. Except this past year, when I had a birthday a couple weeks ago, that one came to me really quickly. What was the worst part of your year? Got it. This past year, we had sort of an incident with our oldest daughter, Emmy. She's 4, and I sort of shared some of this in process because we just needed prayer at the time. But when Emmy was 2, she got ear infections a lot, and during one of these ear infections, she had this lymph node pop up on the side of her neck. She'd get ear infections, and it'd sort of get bigger, and then it'd go down, and it'd get bigger, and it was sort of like a peanut M&M under her skin. And doctors just said, yeah, it's totally normal. It's reactive. It's reacting to the ear infections. And I just, I can tend to be a little bit of a worrier, and I could never get that thing out of the back of my mind. So whether I'm washing her hair in the tub or trying to do a dad ponytail, which is horrible, by the way, I'd see that thing, and it would just freak me out. So her 4th birthday rolls around last December, and I just say, hey, babe, I feel like we should take Emmy and have this thing looked at. So we went to a specialist, and Abby was really quick to introduce me and say, hey, I'm sure this thing is fine, but my husband's freaking out about it. Will you just tell him everything's going to be okay? So the doctor feels on Emmy's neck, and she's up on the table, and he goes, yeah, this is a little concerning. It's gotten a little bit bigger, and we probably want to biopsy it. Now, I'm not a medical expert, but when my 4-year-old's on a table at the hospital, and a doctor's feeling her neck, and he says the word biopsy, I'm like on the floor. Before we could even get home, I had already WebMD'd 50 forms of childhood cancer that my daughter could have probably had, and it was like joy had left the building. Joy was gone. Because I was just convinced that this is not going to end well for us. This is not going to end well for us. And one of the things I noticed was I was apparently wearing it on my sleeve because people that I'm in community with were saying, man, Greg, you're usually a pretty joyful person. You're usually somebody that sort of like comes around with your bells on, and what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And this thing was just eating away at me. The fear was eating away at me. And with probably a week to go before the surgery, I thought, oh, wait. I have this job called pastor, and I try to connect people with God and tell them how good he is. And I've actually not interacted with God at all on this. And so I was in the car. I was driving to a meeting at Oakley, and I just turned off the radio, and I said a prayer that said something like, God, I have been sort of a weenie on this, and I haven't talked to you about this. But if I'm honest, I'm terrified right now. I'm terrified, and I'm having a hard time seeing and believing that you're really good. And if I go through my facts, I know that you work all things for your benefit at the end, but I don't want to go that road right here. And I would love it if you could just end this all right now and make things better. And it was just sort of that raw prayer that I felt like I was just inviting God in to go, I don't have any rope left. All my eggs are in your basket. So you're going to have to do something, God. You're going to have to do something. In the week before that surgery, some really weird things started to happen where rather than people asking me, well, God, hasn't God always been faithful to you? Hasn't he always taken care of you? I started to be the one to have that attitude. We walked into the hospital that Friday morning, and we're walking into Children's, and I'm actually the one with my wife around Abby going, babe, this is going to be fine. God is going to take care of us. Regardless what happens, we're going to be fine. In that moment, we were starting to base our future not on our current terrible circumstances, but we were basing them on a far greater promise, and we were starting to experience the joy of the Lord. That's what the joy of the Lord is. It says, hey, even when the cards are stacked against you, even when fear is saying this is going to be it, the joy of the Lord pops up and it says, hey, I'm so much greater than this. I'm so much greater than this, and I can give you joy beyond your circumstances. Punchline of this story ends well. Emmy had a reactive lymph node that had scarred in. The scar tissue was growing around it and making it bigger. And short of a hangnail, she's a healthy 4-year-old girl. She had this hangnail last week. And you can tell the look on her face. She's concerned about it, but it'll be gone in no time. It'll be gone in no time. Let's do another clip. Oh, I love it. I never know when they're going to pull the clip. We just got more of that one. So Will Ferrell, he's taken one to the jugular. It has nothing to do with anything, but you laughed the hardest at that one. You liked watching him get shot with a dart. So we now know something. All right, so joy. Back to joy. Back to joy. Joy and happiness are not the same thing. And in fact, the Bible tells us about the joy of the Lord that goes far beyond our current circumstances. And that all sounds great, but I'm guessing that some of you go, okay, how do I get that? How do I get that joy that passes all circumstances? How do I get that? Because what I think you just said, Greg, is you were like in a pit and you said some magical prayer and then all of a sudden you had the joy of the Lord, and I'm not buying that. Well, that is true. That is true. The good news is that you don't have to get joy at all. You don't have to get joy at all, because when you get Jesus, joy just comes along with it. If you get Jesus, last point today, you will get joy every time. It's a package deal. Do you know that Hebrews calls Jesus the author and perfecter of your faith? It actually calls him an author. If we go back to those sort of story arcs and remember the tragedies and the comedies, it says Jesus is an author and he's in the business of writing stories. But last time I checked, the story that the American culture was telling us at the box office was the future of our story. It looked a lot like tragedy. Post-apocalyptic movies, Hunger Games, all these movies where the world is ending, it's going to hell in a handbasket, and it's every man for himself. And if we're honest, something in us goes, yeah, that's probably the way my story ends, if I'm honest. And actually, it couldn't be further from the truth, because Jesus is an author, and the only stories he authors have happy endings every time. Every time. The only tragedies that God ever writes into his story are the tragedies that he can redeem. They're one and the same. Jesus is obsessed with your joy. He's absolutely obsessed with it. Do you know that the Bible calls Jesus a vine? It calls him a vine. Look at this in John 15. It says, I'm the vine, and you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. Fruit, remember that. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. Full. Westside, I don't remember, or I don't know for you what Jesus looked like as you were first informed by him, but I know a lot of people who joy and Jesus just do not fit in the same sentence. And Jesus is obsessed with your joy. Later on, the Bible goes out and names these fruits that happen when we attach ourselves to Jesus and fruit just starts popping off of us. The number one, you could probably guess, is love. Love happens when we connect ourselves to Jesus. Number two, fruit of the 12, joy. Joy says every time you get someone who connects themselves to Jesus, things are just going to start to happen, and one of those things is they're going to have incredible joy. Jesus is so obsessed with your joy that listen to what he did as his very first miracle. His very first miracle is in the book of John, chapter 2, and we see Jesus at a wedding reception. And this is a wedding feast, actually. I've been to some that are like long wedding reception, but Jesus is on day 3 of this wedding feast. And finally, what happens is these lushes run out of wine. On day 3, they run out, and his mom notices, and Mary goes, Jesus, they're out of wine. Do something about it. And he goes, this has nothing to do with me. And being a true mom, she looks at his disciples and she goes, do what he tells you. Do what he tells you. So Jesus goes, all right, fine. Go get all of the ceremonial clay jars that were filled with water for the ceremony. Go get all those, something about 180 gallons worth of water. He says, fill them up with water. Fill them with water. And he doesn't do any sort of like black tablecloth. He doesn't wave his hands over them. He just says, fill them with water, draw some out, and take it to the master of the party. We'll pick it up here with the master of what he says. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, he did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first. And when the people have drunk freely, i.e., when the people are toasted, then the poor wine. But you've kept the good wine until now. You know that Jesus is so obsessed with these folks' joy that at day 3 of a party, after they've gone through 180 gallons of wine, he goes, I'll keep this party going and I will make more. I ran the numbers on this. 180 gallons of wine would be about, you ready for this, 900 bottles. 900 bottles, and at about $35 a bottle, this would be $27,000 worth of wine on day 3 of the party. And this isn't like black box wine. This is like Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon aged wine. I'm guessing it costs way more than this. And Jesus said, this is the time where I'm going to use my supernatural power. This is the time where I'm going to teach these people that I'm in tune with God, and I'm going to keep the party going because I am obsessed with your joy. He was all about it. Sometimes when we think about this story, or if you were just to retell it, you might say the last line of this is, man, and then the wine master said, oh, but you, Jesus, you saved the best for last. You saved the best for last. That's actually not what it says at all. It says, you have kept the good wine until when? Now. Now. Man, I'll just admit that sometimes as someone who follows Jesus, I can buy into this whole thing that Jesus will give me joy, but I'll also say, I'll get that when I cross over into heaven. That's when my joy will happen. And Jesus says, no. This is not about joy on the other side. I've come to give you a fullness, an abundance, an overflowing of joy, and I've come to give it to you right now. Last sort of idea for today. Have you ever noticed that in so many comedies, I was noticing this as I was looking for clips, so many comedies aren't just about the punchline. They're not about the punchline. We need more than our ears to get the joke. So much of it is about the physical comedy. Have you ever heard of this? Physical comedy, and it's where people get their whole bodies into it, and our ears and our eyes work together to get the joy out of what's happening. I think this is best illustrated by Tommy Boy. Check this out. Chris Farley, man, he is so good at physical comedy. It's what he was known for. He was known for making us laugh, not by what he said, but by what he did. And when we saw him, whether it was on Saturday Night Live or in a movie, we laughed. Because our eyes said, this is something that's funny. This is bringing us joy. Here's my main point today. My main point today is that when we get Jesus, we will get joy. And so many times, all we have to do is look at him. Look at him. But see, the thing is we all came in here with things that were like magnets for our eyes, that were taking our fears and our anxieties and our worries. They're taking up our brain space. And to be honest, they're just robbing us of our joy. And our eyes can't help but to stare at them. But so many times, God has a promise. He says, hey, when you're starting to get robbed of your joy, I'm going to give you an opportunity to just lift your eyes up and look at me. Because the best type of joy, the type of joy that never goes away, is only found in my son Jesus. And when you look at Jesus, you will get joy. We do that here every weekend. We do this worship thing, not because we've got a great band with great lights and sound, but because we want to have an opportunity to look at some words and to tell our heart, I've been looking at the wrong things. And I'm noticing that my joy is sort of waxing and waning. And if I could just lift my eyes up and look at Jesus, I think I might have some of that restored to me. I think that the joy of the Lord could actually be my strength. So we're going to do the couple choruses of this song that we did at the beginning, Future Past. And basically what we're trying to say is God, regardless of what I'm feeling right now, regardless of my current circumstances and the level of happiness that I have, I know that my joy is rooted in you because you were before I ever was and you will be when I'm done, and you only write happy endings. So Jesus, I just want to look at you. I just want to look at you and I want you to bring my joy back. Would you restore my joy? Make it my strength. Why don't you stand up and let's sing this chorus together.
Like horses driven by kings, they cover the mountains, the valleys below. The breath of your mighty wings, the treasures of wisdom and things to be known, hidden inside your hand. In this fortunate turn of events, you ask me to be your friend. Ask me to be your friend.
we could all go around with many clip levers in our pocket. And when we get bad news, we could just have a funny thing that makes us laugh. But the reality is there's no such thing. There's no such thing. And this week, your joy does not have to be found in your circumstances. It's really hard to control our emotions, but it's really easy to take our eyes and to just look at Jesus, because he promises, hey, when you hang around me, you're going to start to bear fruit, and that fruit looks a lot like joy. Let me just bless you to that end. God, I ask for that every person in here, you would teach their eyes, give them strength to look at you, that we would look to you, that we would look to delight ourselves in you, and that you and you alone would give us the desires of our heart. And God, we acknowledge that we look for joy in a lot of the wrong places, but you will never disappoint, and your joy never runs out. In your name, Jesus, amen. Well, hey, had fun today. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next weekend.